Welcome. In this session, we will talk about tissues. Now, as we know, when cells come together, they form what? They form tissue. Tissues come together to form organ. Organ forms organ system, and finally an organism. So this is how we understand the hierarchy. In this section, we would understand what are tissues. The study of tissue is known as histology. So the term is important. It is called as histology. And then in this section, we would focus on two specific categorizations. One is the plant tissue. The other is the animal tissue. Plant tissues. Now, plant tissues can be simply classified into two categories. The first is meristematic tissues and the second are called as permanent tissues. Permanent tissues can further be classified as simple permanent and complex permanent tissues. In the first round, we would understand meristematic tissues. So, meristematic tissues are those tissues which are actively dividing. That means they help in the growth. Now, growth in two ways. One is in terms of length, so the height would grow. The other is in terms of width. That means the girth of the plant would increase. Okay. So, meristematic tissues are actively dividing tissues which help to increase either the length of the plant or the width. Now, these meristematic cells are small. They have a very thin wall. They are packed tightly. There is no intercellular space which is present. So the cells are packed very closely with no intercellular space that lies between them. And they have a typically large nucleus. Now this is one of the major difference between meristematic and a permanent tissue. Meristematic tissues have a large nucleus which is actually in the center. However, in the case of permanent tissue, there is a small nucleus on the peripheral side. That's one of the very important differences between meristematic and permanent. Besides the fact that meristematic are actively dividing, permanent are not actively dividing cells, and permanent tissues form the bulk of the plant. Right? So, meristematic tissues can be of three types: apical, intercalary and lateral. Let's understand each of these. Apical means the tip. That means the end. Now, when we talk about a plant, this plant has a growth in terms of root as well as shoot. So, the tip of the shoot as well as the tip of the root, both would have this apical meristematic tissues, and the idea is to increase the length of the plant. So, it could be upwards as well as downwards in case of roots. The next is intercalary. Intercalary meristems are present at the internodes or the base of the leaf. Base of the leaf as in the case of pinus, and the idea is to increase the node or the length. Right? The next is lateral. Now lateral, as the name suggests, grows in radially. So what happens is the width increases. A good example is what? Cork cambium. So cork cambium of the plant explains that the width of the plant would grow, and this explains a lateral meristematic tissue. Now meristematic tissues are also known as meristem. That's another important term that you must be familiar with. The next important thing is the shape. Now interestingly, meristematic tissues could be of rectangular shape, oval shape or spherical shape. Any of these shape could be present in the case of meristematic tissues. Coming next, we move to another classification which is permanent tissues. Now permanent tissues are divided into simple permanent and complex permanent. Complex permanent would include xylem phloem, which we would understand in a while. Then we have the simple permanent tissues. Simple permanent tissues can be classified into three types. So simple permanent tissues can be classified into three types. One is the supportive simple permanent. The second is the protective simple permanent. And the third is the conducting tissues. Now conducting, which is the part of the complex permanent, so we'll leave it for a while. But under supportive and protective, what are there? Supportive, as we say, parenchyma, collenchyma, skerlenchyma. So they provide support to the plant and they are the supportive permanent tissues. The next is protective permanent tissues. Under protective permanent tissues, we have epidermis and cork. Now what is the difference? Epidermis is the outermost layer. It's the protective layer. So in the case of leaf, if you understand what is epidermis, there would be an upper epidermis and a lower epidermis. On the lower epidermis, what would be present? Stomata. And this stomata would be protected by what? This stomata would be protected by guard cells. Guard cells would control the opening and the closure of the stomata. So the lower epidermis do have stomata which actually maintain the turgidity of the cells present. So epidermis, the upper epidermis, lower epidermis in the case of leaf. Now sometimes this epidermis is again important because in certain cases it does form cuticle. The next is cork. What is cork? Cork is also known as phloem. Now phloem is a protective tissue which is usually seen in old dicot plants. It can be lignified and there can be a deposition of wax which is known as suberin. So suberin is a waxy deposition which is part of the cork, and cork is actually at the periphery. In the case of old stems and old plants, monocots as well as dicots, there are dead cells which are actually waxy and have a coating outside which we call as suberin. The idea of cork is what? The basic idea of cork is to prevent injury to the plant. So it actually protects the plant and therefore it falls under the category of protective tissue. The role of epidermis is again protection, but cork is more turgid and therefore provides better protection from injuries. The next important thing under cork is what? Cork does have pores in certain cases. These pores are known as lenticles. Now what is the function of lenticles? Lenticles help provide airflow within the tissues and the internal tissues and therefore maintain the aeration within the system. Coming on to the next, which is supportive tissues. Supportive tissues are classified as parenchyma, collenchyma, skerlenchyma. Parenchyma, as you can see in the diagram, are loosely packed. They do have ample of intercellular spaces, usually a single large vacuole, and a bulk part of it is present. So the above section, as you can see, are the cross section for parenchymatic cells, and the down one are the longitudinal cells, longitudinal section. So under the longitudinal section, we can see there is a small nucleus which is present within a large cytoplasm, and this has a very thin cell wall. However, in the case of collenchyma, what happens is the collenchyma cells are arranged in a systematic order in hexagonal structure, but their outer corners have a thick outer layer. Okay, so the primary wall here in the case of parenchyma is thin. However, it is thick in the case of collenchyma. Now, parenchyma, the main purpose is what? Parenchyma, the main idea is to store the food, and if it is in a plant which has chlorophyll, it would have chlorenchyma, and the idea would be to synthesize food. Similarly, if it is a floating plant, it would be arenchyma. The idea is to help the plant, support the plant to float. Collenchyma, on the other hand, provides flexibility. That means if there is injury onto the plant would just don't drop, it would bend, and that capability of bending comes from where? Comes from collenchyma. So collenchyma actually provides flexibility to the plant. And then we have skerlenchyma. Skerlenchyma are dead, thick and lignified cells. They do not have any intercellular space that is present. There is no cytoplasm, and they have an end-to-end movement, as you can see. The primary cell wall is thin, but the secondary cell wall is thick. Again, a very important characteristic. Among all these, skerlenchyma is one which has dead and thick lignified walls. So very, very important. and the idea of sclerenchyma is to provide support to the plant. Now this sclerenchyma has two types of cells. One is skerlets and the other is the stony cells, skerlet, which is the stony cell, and the other is the fiber. Now skerlet, which is the stony structure, is present where? Pulp of guava is a good example to understand skerlets. Seed coat is another example in case of fruits which are more stony. For example, nutshells are good examples of skerlets. Then there is fiber, which is another example of sclerenchyma. So sclerenchyma, which is classified as skerlets, and fibers are a classic one. Fibers are one which are elongated, narrow, and they taper at both the end. As you can see in this diagram, they are tapering. However, neither the parenchyma nor the collenchyma are tapering. They are rectangular pieces, as you can see in the cross section, the longitudinal section. However, sclerenchyma tapers at both the end. So that is a classic characteristic which makes it different from parenchyma and collenchyma. So we are all done with supportive tissue. We have completed protective tissue, supportive tissue. Now coming on to permanent tissues which are complex in nature. Xylem and phloem. The role of xylem, as we have understood in our lower grades, is to actually transport water and minerals to the plant. However, the role of phloem is to transport the processed material from the leaves to the different parts of the plant. Now xylem can be understood or has four components. They are called as trachea, vessel, xylem parenchyma, and xylem fiber. So xylem trachea is what? They are elongated dead cells. As you can see, they taper at both the ends. Very important. Okay. So trachea, xylem trachea tapers at both the end. All forms of xylem are dead except xylem parenchyma, which is living. Very, very important. Phloem, on the other hand, is a living conductive tissue with only phloem fiber, which is dead. So a good way to remember is both xylem fiber and phloem fiber are dead. So that's how you can remember. But phloem is a living conductive tissue, and therefore phloem fiber is an exception, which is dead. Easiest way to remember. So coming on to all the four elements of xylem. Understanding trachea first. It is dead, elongated, tapering at both the ends. The wall is lignified and the ends are not perforated, but in certain cases there are pits which are seen within the tracheates. The next is the xylem vessel. Xylem vessel appears to be a tube-like structure, as you can see here. It is open at both the ends. Now, can you answer why it is open at both the ends? The logic is very simple. The end actually gets dissolved, and this allows a smooth conduction through the xylem vessel. So to allow a free conduction, xylem vessel have actually the ends which are dissolved, but the wall of the xylem vessel is thick as well as lignified. The next is xylem parenchyma. Xylem parenchyma, as we said, is living. The idea is conduction of water through the xylem parenchyma, and since it is parenchyma, we have already understood the function of parenchyma. It does store food and helps in the movement of minerals as well. The next is xylem fiber. Xylem fiber is also known as wood fiber or sclerenchymatous fiber. Sclerenchymatous meaning it is actually rigid, a little rigid in nature, and as you can see the structure, it is long, narrow, tapering and lignified. The idea of fiber is what? Provide mechanical support. So that is the basic differences and the understanding of the four elements of xylem. Coming on next is what? Coming on next is the phloem. Now phloem, as we said, is a living conductive tissue with only exception where we say phloem fibers are present and phloem fibers are dead. Now coming on to sieve tubes. So as you can see the structure here, this is the sieve tube. The end of the sieve tube would have the sieve plates, and these are cylindrical conducting tissues which are arranged end to end. So one, next, next, next. So it's a arrangement which is seen. They are mature cells without any nucleus, but the walls which are present are thin in the case of sieve tubes. Very, very important, sieve tubes have thin walls. Now, then comes the companion cells. Companion cells are again one which have very thin wall, as you can see in the diagram, but from the shape we can understand they are parenchymatous. That means they help in storage. The cytoplasm here is very, very dense, and there is a prominent nucleus that can be seen in the case of companion cells. Now, companion cells are associated with sieve tubes and they help in the conduction by means of plasmodesmata. So, the process of conduction of the food through companion cells become important. The next is phloem parenchyma. Now, as you can see here is the parenchymatic cells. So, phloem parenchyma is living. Very, very important. If we go back, we remember here xylem parenchyma was also living. Okay, with exception to all which were dead. In case of xylem parenchyma was living. Similarly, phloem parenchyma is also living. The idea of phloem parenchyma is again, it is a parenchymatic tissue. So what it would do? It would store food. Then comes the phloem fiber. Phloem fiber is dead and is an exception in the case of phloem. It is elongated, has lignified cells, and it provides mechanical strength. Good example of phloem fiber, if you see around in daily life, jute, hemp. So all these jute bags, hemp bags that you use are made up of actually phloem fibers. So it provides mechanical strength and durability. So this is a basic understanding of the plant tissue. Now here what we have done is taken a quick section to understand. So this is a plant. We have the roots. This is the soil line and the shoot section. Now this is the internode area, the area between the two nodes, and this is where the internodal meristematic tissues are present. Here is the apical bud, and this is the point where apical meristematic tissues would be present. So we have understood the apical meristematic tissue, the internode, and then across the stem there would be the lateral meristematic tissues. And then among the leaf, stem and root, we have seen that in all of these three there is xylem and phloem, which together forms the vascular bundle. So xylem and phloem together is called as a vascular bundle. Now if we talk about the stem, the arrangement of the xylem and phloem is a concentric ring. However, in the case of root, xylem is between the phloem and this arrangement is a kind of inverted Y within a phloem. Okay. So that's again a vascular tissue arrangement. However, the details on the TS of the transverse section of stem and root we would go with in the further lectures. So this is the very basic of understanding the plant tissues and the classification for plant tissues. Now, animal tissue classification is one of the most simplest classification to understand. We can broadly classify animal tissues as epithelial tissues, muscular tissues, connective tissues and nervous tissues. However, each of these tissues we would understand in separate detail in advanced lectures, but here we would have an overview about each of the tissues. So, to begin with, the first one is epithelial tissue. Now, epithelial tissues, to understand simply, are flat. They are actually the tissues which are on the layer surface. Now, this epithelial tissues could be classified under two ways, simple and stratified. Then, under the simple one and the stratified one, the classification remains the same. What is the classification? It could be squamous, that means squarish in shape. It could be cuboidal, that is cubical in shape, or it could be columnar, that is columns in shape. So based on the shape, it could be column-like, it could be a cube-like, a dice that you play with, or a squamous, which is on the epidermis, the surface. Now let's begin with the simplest one, the squamous. Squamous is the epidermis Now this squamous is flat, it is plate-like, and therefore it is also called as pavement. You go to the garden, you walk on a pavement, and it's arranged in a squamous section, and therefore squamous ones are called as pavement epithelium. Very, very important, very, very simple to learn. The surface is thin. The most interesting feature is on the surface, wherever you see a bulge, definitely on this surface you won't be able to see microscopic bulge, but on the surface of the cell, if you see a small bulge, that indicates what? That indicates nucleus, as simple as that. So under a microscope, the identification becomes very simple. The cell surface or the wall is actually thin in the case of simple squamous. Good examples: blood vessels, epidermis of the skin, buccal cavity, Bowman's capsule in kidney. Then we have lungs, the alveoli of the lungs. All of those are examples of squamous epithelium. Coming on next is cuboidal. As the name suggests, cubical structures, or they could be polygonal, hexagonal in nature. Most likely cubical in nature. They have a nucleus which is present in the center. As you can see in the diagram, nucleus is located in the center of the cubical structure. That's one of the classic characteristics. Now where they are present and what is the function? The most important function of cuboidal epithelial cells is excretion, secretion, gamete formation. So those are some of the common functions. Now where are cuboidal cells present? Cuboidal cells are present in the germinal epithelium of the gonads. It's also present in the endocrine systems, for example in thyroid. In the case of pancreatic glands, you have cuboidal epithelium. So to best understand, you can have in mind the major endocrine glands. That would give you a rough idea about where cuboidal epithelial cells are present. The next is columnar. Now columnar are interesting. As they said, they are column-like. Now interesting to note, it's not just the epithelial is columnar. Again, the nucleus is also columnar. So it is a little elongated. That's what you can remember here. So columnar, the nucleus is elongated, usually elongated at the base side. The next interesting thing is these columnar ones have numerous modifications. Three important modifications that we would understand. One is ciliated, the other is glandular, and the third one is sensory. Three important modifications of columnar cells. Ciliated, as the name suggests, would have cilia. Now cilia and flagella we have already understood in the previous lectures. So cilia is seen on the body of paramecium, a good example to recall back. Flagella in the case of Euglena, dinoflagellates. Now cilia are small hair-like structures on the top of the columnar structure, and therefore we call it as ciliated columnar epithelium, where it is present in the nasal passage. It avoids any dust movement inside the nose. Also in the uriniferous tubules, ciliated columnar epithelials are present. The idea of columnar cells overall, be it ciliated, glandular or sensory, is increase or help in the process of absorption. The next one is glandular. Glandular could be uniglandular or multiglandular. Now let's understand the difference between the two. Uniglandular is usually seen in the goblet cells in alimentary canal. Multiglandular is present in sweat glands, oil glands, which are also called as sebaceous glands in the body. The next is sensory columnar. Sensory columnar are ones which have free sensory end, and now since they have free sensory end, where they would be present on the sense organs, as simple as that. That means taste bud, olfactory sense in the nose. So there is where you have the sensory columnar epithelium which is present. Next coming to is stratified. Now as I said, the three classification that we did, squamous, cuboidal and columnar. All of these three would apply to stratified as well. So you would have stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal and stratified columnar. So these are the various ways under which we would have the stratified epithelium. These stratified epithelium are As the name suggests, stratified. That means more than one layer. So they have various layers of epithelium which are present. As you can see in the diagrams, they have multiple layers which are present. And usually the upper layer in certain cases could be of dead squamous epithelial cells. That's again important to note. So in the case of squamous, the upper layer is sometimes dead in nature. The idea is it remains tough and it protects the inner layers of epithelium, and that's the major reason why stratified ones are important, to avoid any kind of mechanical injury. So this was the first classification. Coming on to the next classification is connective tissues. Now connective tissue is an interesting classification. Under connective tissue, we have three types of tissues. One is a proper connective tissue, which would include areolar, fat, and ligaments or tendon, which are called as supportive ones, which are actually the connecting ones, right? Then the supportive ones are cartilage and bone, and finally the fluid, which is blood and lymph. So let's understand each of these one by one. So when I talk about the connective tissues, the proper connective tissues, areolar, adipose, and fibrous. Under fibrous, we have white fibrous and yellow fibrous. What is the difference? The yellow one is the ligament. What is the function of ligament? It connects bone to bone. What is white fibrous? White fibrous is tendon. It connects muscle to bone. The one that connects muscle to muscle is known as fascia, which is not considered under the fibrous tissue classification here. So we have taken two, that's ligament connecting bone to bone, yellow in nature, yellow in color, elastic in nature, connects bone to bone, where this kind of ligaments are usually found. So when you have a bone connecting to another joint, okay, so at the ends of the joint you would have ligaments which are present. So ligament injury is a common injury. Then we talk about blood vessels, bronchioles, where ligaments are present. Where is tendon? Tendon is the point where bone would be attaching to a muscle. So that is one place where you find tendon. Besides that, the dura mater in the brain as well as the spinal cord. That's where tendon. So coming on next is adipose tissue. Now adipose, as the name suggests, the function is fat. Okay, so it stores fat. It is oval in shape. The main function is storage of fat. Where is the common storage of fat? Below the eyeball, the region that we see is the area where you have fat storage. A lot of adipose tissue here. The area around brain, area in the heart are some of the areas. Now main function, as we say, storing fat. Besides storing fat, what would be the other important function? Insulation. Since it is storing fat, it would be insulating the body, and also it would give shape to the body. Along with that, one very important function, it helps in absorbing the shock. So fat acts as shock absorber. Very, very important. So therefore, this is what is adipose tissue. Coming on next is areolar tissue. Areolar tissues are the most commonly distributed tissues. They are star shaped and also called as fibroblast. Now there are various versions of areolar tissues. One of the versions is mast cell. Mast cell respond to allergic reactions. The next important one is when there is an injury onto the body, which cells would come into account? It's the areolar tissues again. So when there is a mechanical injury, then these areolar tissues would be actually responsible. Where are they found? They are found in the kidneys, below the skin, and some of the major functions, as we said, in the case of allergic reactions, mast cell are an example of areolar tissue. Similarly, secretion and heparin production is one another function of areolar tissue. The next tissues that we talk about is the fluid connective tissues or the vascular tissues. Here we have two important ones, blood and lymph. Now blood is around 8 to 10% by weight. Now under blood, we say 55% of the blood by volume is made of what? It is made of fluid matrix. Now within the blood, there are two important things. One is the plasma, the other is the blood cells. Under the blood cells, you have WBC, RBC and platelets. Platelets help in immunity, helps in clotting. WBC helps in immunity. WBC are leukocytes, RBC are erythrocytes. Then the function of RBC is production of hemoglobin, right? So that's one of the important things that we understand. Coming on to plasma, under plasma, fluid matrix is one of the most important things. And then is lymph. What is lymph? Lymph is colorless. It does not have any blood cells which are present, and therefore it is considered as a middleman of exchange between the blood cells and as well as the tissue. Another important difference between lymph and blood is lymph usually has less protein and less fibrogen in contrast to blood. Now in the blood, we have understood the blood groups, the ABO, in a separate lecture, so we won't go into that detail for this lecture as of now. The next is the supportive tissue. Under supportive tissue, we have bones and cartilage. Now, bone is the bony structure which is mainly made up of phosphate and calcium. Now, within the bone lies the marrow cavity, where is the bone marrow, and there is where the production of blood cells takes place. So, bone marrow is the cavity where production of the blood cells would take place. Usually, most importantly, in the long bones, there is bone cavity which is seen. The next is cartilage. Cartilage is an elastic material. There are chondrins which have chondrocytes, and these chondrocytes are the one which actually provide flexibility or elasticity, we can say, to the surface. For example, in the ear, in the nasal septum, we have cartilage which is present. So, presence of cartilage is again important, and the role of cartilage, as we understood, is very, very important to understand. It provides support. The next is muscular tissue. Under muscular tissue, we classify it as striated, non-striated and cardiac. The striated one are also known as stripped. Unstriated are known as unstripped, and then is the cardiac. Now, cardiac muscle is an involuntary muscle which is present only in heart, as the name suggests, cardiac. So, it's present only in the heart. It is very important that it has intercalated disc. The only one of the muscular tissue where intercalated discs are present is where it is in the cardiac muscle. Now, cardiac muscle, it is working 24/7. It pumps heart and it contracts tirelessly. The next is striated muscles. Striated muscles or the skeletal muscles, also called as stripped muscles, are voluntary. That means I want to move my hand, I have full control whether I want to move or not. The most important feature is it has alternate bands of light and dark color, as you can see in the diagram. So here is a dark band, light band, dark band, light band. So arrangement of a alternate dark and light band is a classic characteristic of a skeletal muscle, which is not seen in the case of smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is also called as non-striated or non-stripped. It is present in the involuntary organs. For example, the alimentary canal, urinary bladder are good examples to explain the smooth muscles. Now, one very important thing. In the case of smooth muscle, what is absent? Sarcolemma is absent, which is present in the case of skeletal muscle as well as cardiac muscle. Which of the three have an ability to remain contracted? Now, unstripped muscles have the highest ability to remain contracted because they are involuntary, followed by cardiac, followed by skeletal. So that is again a very important thing that you must remember or know. Now, striated muscles or skeletal muscles help in what? The most common function is locomotion, movement, as we can understand, and also this gets fatigued. Another interesting example of skeletal muscle is what? Tongue muscle. If I want to speak, I'll use it. Otherwise, I don't. Okay, so that is an example of a skeletal muscle. Coming on next is the nervous tissue. Under the nervous tissue, we have covered this in a separate lecture. So just to have an overview here, you have the nerve cells. Along with the nerve cell, there is nerve fiber. So nervous tissue could be explained as neuron plus nerve fiber. Now nerve fiber, the main role is to conduct the message from one part of the body to another part, to receive the stimuli and to send the stimuli. So sensory and motor nerves take into account this. And the next is the neuron. Now the structure of neuron is made up of two important components. First is the cyton. The cyton is the main cell body of the neuron, and along with the cyton, which is a star-shaped structure, it has a cytoplasm. The cytoplasm of the neuron is known as neuroplasm. Since it is part of the neuron, the cytoplasm of a neuron is known as neuroplasm. And then we have a elongated section which is known as dendron. Now under the dendron, we have the axon as well as dendrites. Now axon is a single long running chain which is present. The ends are divided into terminal arborations which are known as terminals or the axon terminals, and then there is presence of dendrites as well, and these dendrites are present on the cyton. The structure on the cyton is the dendrites that are present. Now the message goes from one neuron to the another, where you have the neurotransmitters that come and play an important role. So this is the process through which nerve impulse moves to the brain, and brain sends the signal back to actually take a decision. So this is a very important aspect of nervous tissue. So to wind up, under the animal tissues, we have four basic classification: epithelial tissues, muscular tissues, connective tissues, and nervous tissues. Under muscular, we have understood it could be skeletal, smooth, or cardiac muscles. Under epithelial, broadly it is simple and stratified. Under simple or stratified, again both of these, there are three classifications which are squamous, cuboidal, or columnar in nature. Then under connective, it is either a proper connective tissue which is adipose, areolar, or fibrous, that could be tendon or ligament. It could be a supportive tissue which could be a bone or a cartilage, and a fluid which could be blood or lymph. So those are some of the basic categorization under animal tissue. So this was a brief introduction. If you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comment section. Thanks for joining in.